Number 8. The USS Kittiwake. Launched in 1945, the USS Kittiwake was an American submarine rescue ship that served during World War II. The 251-foot-long vessel went on to enjoy a lengthy career participating in submarine maneuvers and sea trials in the Caribbean and Mediterranean seas, as well as the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. The Kittiwake also participated in rescue and salvage missions. In addition to saving stranded soldiers and vehicles, it picked up 12 Cuban refugees who were found in a boat off Key West in 1963, attempting to flee their home country. After the Challenger space shuttle disaster in 1986, the ship and its crew found the missing black box at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean during a massive search undertaken by the Department of Defense and the U.S. Coast Guard. The Kittiwake was decommissioned in 1994 after 49 years of service. It languished in Norfolk, Virginia for several years during negotiations to relocate it to Grand Cayman as a natural reef and scuba diving site. In 2011, after several years of delays, the decaying ship was sunk in the shallow waters off 7 Mile Beach in the Cayman Islands. It's one of the Caribbean's most famous wrecks to this day. However, what was once regarded as a simple popular tourist dive was altered after Hurricane Nate, which had downgraded to a tropical storm by the time it reached the area in the Cayman Islands where the Kittiwake was anchored to the sea floor. The storm broke the sunken ship free from its anchor chains, pushed the wreck onto its side, and moved it 20 feet deeper than it had been before. The new location is also extremely close to a dangerous reef drop-off known as the Sand Chute. The site is now significantly more eerie and presents a greater risk to divers as well. Number 7. CAMIGUIN Cemetery. Many, if not most people, would agree that graveyards are spooky enough on dry land, and that the idea of encountering one at the bottom of the sea is even scarier. During the 1870s, a volcano called Mount Vulcan erupted in the Philippine province of Camiguin, causing part of the island to sink below sea level and killing thousands of residents. Many were buried alive or drowned as the town of CAMIGUIN sank below the waves. The submerged burial ground sits off the coast of Cagayan de Oro. Originally called Punta Pasil or the Cape of Pasil, the site is better known today by its nickname as the Sunken Cemetery. It's marked by a single lonely cross that rises up out of the Bohol Sea. The underwater graves and other remnants of CAMIGUIN were still visible during low tide until 1948. That year, Mount Vulcan erupted again, sinking everything 20 feet deeper below the water's surface. Now, the burials remain underwater at all times, marked by crosses that once stood on dry land and now scatter the seafloor. The site functions as an artificial reef and has become a popular diving attraction despite its macabre origins. Number 6. The SS Cotopaxi. The SS Cotopaxi was a bulk carrier that was built after World War I as part of a US-based emergency shipbuilding program. It disappeared in 1925 after departing Charleston, South Carolina for Havana, Cuba. The ship took its 32-person crew with it to the bottom of the sea somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle after trying to radio for help during a brutal tropical storm. It was rediscovered during the 1980s but wasn't positively identified as the Cotopaxi until 2 years ago. Oddly, the wreck wasn't found in the Bermuda Triangle where it supposedly sank, but was instead spotted 40 miles off the coast of St. Augustine, Florida. Nicknamed the Bear Wreck by locals, the ship was identified through good old-fashioned historical research and by the process of elimination. The lengthy investigation uncovered some interesting details. It was found that the crew members' heartbroken families had sued over their disappearances. They convinced the Cotopaxi's carpenter to testify in the case, claiming that broken hatch covers that were used to cover coal could have caused the vessel to leak and sink during the storm. It also came to light that the crew's distress calls had been picked up in Jacksonville, not far from where the ship was found. The Cotopaxi's discovery and location challenges long-held theories that its disappearance had anything to do with the Bermuda Triangle. And while the region is shrouded in superstition, most scientists challenge any supernatural claims regarding events that have happened there or anywhere nearby. Number 5. A disturbing ancient grave. To anyone with claustrophobia, the thought of going cave diving is undoubtedly terrifying on its own. After all, it involves squeezing through long, narrow tunnels with no easy escape, and underwater no less. But some people find their passion with this dangerous pastime, which can lead to some equally scary yet fascinating discoveries. In 2016, cave divers Vicente Fito and Ivan Hernandez discovered some ancient human remains while exploring the Chan Hole Cave near Tulum, along Mexico's Caribbean coastline. They found the skeleton, which belonged to a horribly disfigured woman, while searching for another skeleton which was unfortunately taken by thieves. Only around 30% of the woman's bones were recovered, but they were nevertheless telling. An analysis revealed that the 5-foot 4-inch tall woman died nearly 10,000 years ago when she was around 30 years old. Her skull was injured in 3 places, and there are no signs that the wounds began healing before she perished, indicating that she may have been bludgeoned to death. At the same time, it's difficult to know whether the woman died from her wounds or if she initially survived, according to study leader Wolfgang Stinisbeck. Either way, he said she endured a very traumatic and unhappy end to her life. The woman's skull also had crater-like deformities, pointing toward a possible bacterial infection such as Treponema peritonitis, which is related to syphilis. If this is the case, then it represents the oldest known case of the disease in the Americas. The discovery is helping to shed light on who America's early inhabitants actually were. A study concluded that at the end of the last ice age, at least 2 distinct human populations lived in what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The shape of the woman's skull and her cavity-riddled teeth indicate that she ate a high-sugar diet. This suggests that she belonged to a group that lived separately from the area's hunters and gatherers. Scholars are embroiled in a long-running debate over who arrived in the Americas first and when. Discoveries like this, as well as a 13,000-year-old skeleton that was recently found nearby, are helping to answer these questions and piece together a more accurate version of the historical narrative. Imagine coming across the remains of a potentially disfigured or murdered person from thousands of years ago while exploring underwater caves. How would you react? Tell us in the comments below. While you're there, make sure to like the video. Number 4. A missing nuclear weapon. While searching for sea cucumbers off the coast of British Columbia, Canada back in 2016, commercial diver Sean Smirashinsky came across a strange, flying saucer-like metal device. The bizarre object could be a lost nuclear weapon that disappeared after crashing in the area back in 1950, along with a US B-36 bomber. Shortly after the discovery, the Canadian Department of National Defense announced that it did not believe the object contained active nuclear material. Smirashinsky found the item off the coast of Pitt Island near the Alaskan border with Canada. He told the reporters that it was bigger than a king-sized bed and described it as having a round bottom and being perfectly flat on top with a bagel-shaped hole in the center. Due to the area's remoteness, it took Smirashinsky several days to reach a town where he could report his findings to locals and see if anyone knew what the object in question was. One elderly resident reportedly said, "Maybe you found that nuke they lost here in the 50s. The object seems to fit the profile for such a device, especially since it was relatively common for nuclear weapons to be lost during the Cold War, only to be rediscovered decades later. One of the main reasons that nuclear weapons can occasionally get lost and remain undetermined in origin for so long is due to the extreme secrecy surrounding nuclear weapons during the Cold War. Both the US and the then Soviet Union are anxious to keep any details surrounding their nuclear weapons arsenals and programs extremely classified, along with any information related to these programs. One reason, keeping design and capabilities top secret, but another, avoiding the fear and backlash of locals who could be in danger should a weapon be inadvertently set off. So could this be the lost nuke that has mystified military historians since the 1950 American B-36 Bomber 75 crash in the area? It seems fairly possible. Number 3. Bagged human remains. Some teens were exploring a remote Seattle beach in 2020 when they found a small black suitcase in the water. As they curiously approached it, they joked around about what might be inside. One of the kids commented that perhaps the bag was filled with money. That would have been nice, but it wasn't the case. A group member prodded the luggage open with a stick as her peers cheered her on. Suddenly, they were overwhelmed by an unbearable foul odor. Whatever was inside the suitcase, it was definitely dead. Suspecting they'd found human remains, the spooked youths called the police. Fire trucks and other emergency vehicles rushed to the scene. Authorities confirmed that the luggage contained dismembered body parts. They searched the area and found several other bags filled with human remains. Few things could be more terrifying. The deceased individuals in question turned out to be 35-year-old Jessica Lewis and 27-year-old Austin Wenner. They had died about a month earlier from multiple gunshot wounds. Their landlord, Michael Lee Dudley, was charged with their murders. Lewis and Wenner were renting a room from Dudley when they began struggling to afford the rent. He ordered the pair to leave, and a big blowout ensued between the two parties. Neighbors later said that they overheard a male pleading, saying, "Please don't do this. Please, just let me leave." Then they heard gunshots. Police reported to the scene that night, but Dudley didn't answer the door, so they simply left. Sadly, by then it was probably too late to save the couple's lives. Detectives think that Dudley had help carrying out the gruesome crime. Local news reported, based on the court documents, that the cuts on the victims' bodies were disorganized and appeared to be made with different tools. Number 2. Ultra black fish. The pitch-black deep sea is by nature a mysterious place full of the unknown. Some of the world's darkest creatures can be found lurking in the equally dark waters near the sea floor. It is here that they camouflage themselves against predators amid the complete absence of sunlight, simply by blending in with the blackness that surrounds them. The so-called ultra-black fish has evolved to absorb 99.5% of the light that hits them, making them around 20 times darker than everyday objects that are black, according to new reports. A recent study analyzed 16 ultra-black fish species including the fangtooth, the Pacific black dragon, the anglerfish, and the black swallower. These fish, which are found in Monterey Bay in the Gulf of Mexico, appear to have adopted their darkened pigmentation independently of one another. So what does this mean? In the words of study author Alexander Davis, the ultra-black quality appeared on its own more than once throughout the fish family tree. Some species live as much as 3 miles beneath the ocean's surface, where the light that exists is produced by bioluminescent organisms. That deep down, there's nowhere to take cover from predators. A creature's extremely dark pigment enables it to hide in plain sight and avoid being eaten. Tiny packets of pigment in skin cells, known as melanosomes, are arranged differently in ultra-black fish than they are in other species. When it comes to ultra-black fish, melanosomes are geometrically shaped in a way that's optimal for absorbing light. Their skin is some of the darkest material ever discovered. Researchers believe that the discovery could be useful for developing light-trapping materials for things like solar panels and telescopes. Number 1. Cremated Coral Reef. Located off the Miami coast, the Neptune Memorial Reef is inviting at first glance. In fact, it looks like nothing more than an entrance to an underwater city complete with roads, gates, ruins, benches, and statues. It's the world's largest underwater city and artificial coral reef, and it's rather quaint until you realize that it's made from a mixture of cremated human remains and cement. The unique columbarium can be found roughly 3¼ miles off Key Biscayne, where it sits 40 feet beneath the waves. Officially opened in 2007, the underwater necropolis was the idea of the Neptune Society, a Florida crematorium. Eerie, silent, and beautiful, the unusual artificial reef was designed by Florida artist Kim Brandel. The underwater cemetery is made up of 16 acres of cremated remains cast into concrete memorials, statues, bronze and steel accents, crumbling ruins, and gates. Depending on your viewpoint, this open to the public final resting place is either fascinating or incredibly creepy. Would you ever be interested in diving underwater to tour the Miami Underground Cemetery, the labyrinth of caves off of Tulum where divers found a skeleton, or the wreckage of the Kittiwake? Number 10. A ship of riches. The Russian armored cruiser ship called the Dmitry Donskoy sank off the coast of South Korea in 1905. In 2018, it was rediscovered by an exploration group. They found the vessel over 1,200 feet beneath the surface of the ocean. It had once belonged to the Russian Baltic Fleet, sailing the seven seas from 1885 until eventually it was blown to pieces during the Battle of Tsushima. This was back when Russia was fighting against Japan before World War I. The ship sank, but no one knew exactly where it sank. And through the years, it was just kind of forgotten and abandoned. But here's the deal. The shipwreck could be holding as much as $130 billion in gold. So how do people just forget about that? The Korean marine exploration company that found it said that they also discovered some mysterious iron boxes. When the ship was lost at sea, it was supposedly carrying 200 tons of gold. If these iron boxes are what the explorers think they are literally chests of treasure that could make every last one of them mega rich. Now it's just a matter of the explorers actually diving down and bringing the boxes back to the surface. Seems like a small price to pay for a mission, considering what the reward could be. Number 9. The most famous shipwreck. On the beautiful island of Zakynthos in Greece, there's a famous shipwreck that's been photographed by more tourists than any other abandoned wreck on the planet. The wreckage can be found at Navajo Beach, a secluded cove with pristine sand, crystal clear water, and a rusting ship that looks totally out of place. What's really mysterious is that no one is quite sure how the ship got there in the first place. We know it was sometime between 1980 and 1983. The ship was called the MV Panayotis, and it was part of a smuggling operation. It smuggled humans, cigarettes, and wine into Greece. It was when the authorities caught it that the ship accidentally got itself cornered in the cove. At least, this is one theory. There are many other theories, like that the ship lost power, or that it accidentally washed ashore because of the weather, etc. Either way, the villagers saw the ship crash and quickly ran down to the cove. There, as the small crew tried to protect their cargo, the villagers ran away with everything they could get their hands on. The ship has been sitting there in the sand ever since, and it's quite the sight to see. Number 8. The Nazi Hunter. An abandoned ship, a Nazi hunter from World War II, has just recently been discovered off the coast of Canada. It's the U.S. Revenue Cutter Bear, identified after being lost 60 years ago in the cold of the North Atlantic. The ship was originally built in Scotland back in 1874 as a steam-powered vessel. It had a long career in the Coast Guard, it fought in both wars, and it got famous for its successful patrols in the water off the coast of Greenland. It was there where it helped to track and apprehend German spy ships like the Nazi vessel Busko. But after 89 years of dedicated service, the U.S. had no more use for the ship. It was decommissioned in 1963 and was supposed to be a floating restaurant stationed in Philadelphia. But as it was being moved from Nova Scotia in Canada to Philadelphia, it broke free of its tow line and was lost. Nobody bothered to go look for it, and it sank into the Atlantic. It wasn't until 2019 that a research expedition discovered its underwater remains totally by accident. They were able to identify the bear by analyzing its various features and dimensions, which matched up with historical records. Number 7. The PUNIC warship. In the Mediterranean, an ancient abandoned ship from 2,200 years ago was discovered. When researchers went down to look at the ship lying on the seabed off the coast of Sicily, they discovered a whole host of distinct animal species living in it. What was once a fabulous warship is now a home to over 100 unique marine animals. How this ship ended up on the bottom of the sea is a fascinating story. It was when Rome and Carthage first started fighting in the middle of the 3rd century BC. The year was 264, and there was a great naval battle off the island of Sicily. The fighting actually went on for about 23 years. That's a long time. At some point during the warfare, what's known as the First Punic War, the ship sank. Then, over the course of 2,000 years, it became a stable marine ecosystem. Researchers found 33 different types of gastropods, 25 species of mollusks, 33 types of worms, and over 23 types of bryozoans living on the ship's bronze ram alone. If you had the chance, would you take a deep dive down to this abandoned ship to check out all the spectacular marine life? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. The Lusitania. Just 1 year after World War I erupted on May 7, 1915, the RMS Lusitania was torpedoed by a German U-boat and destroyed. This wasn't a military ship, but an ocean liner that was on its way from New York to Liverpool. Out of the 1,900 passengers and crew, 1,100 perished. It was one of the biggest pushes the U.S. had to finally enter the war, although they still didn't step up for another 2 years. The ship was found 20 years after it sank in 1935. Ever since, underwater investigators have been trying to find clues hidden inside the shipwreck. While it's impossible right now to bring the enormous liner back to the surface, they've managed to recover some artifacts. Particularly, they've been bringing telegraphs up from the ruined ship in the hopes that they contain information via commands sent to the engine room from officers on the bridge. But as of yet, no useful information has been found. The ship is still sitting abandoned 270 feet beneath the surface. Number 5. The ship of the French Baron. About 40 years ago, a mysterious sunken ship was found in the water off the coast of Israel. New research is suggesting that this suspicious abandoned vessel may have belonged to a famous French baron. Researchers have pored through records and documents from the 1800s and concluded that the wreck is connected to Baron de Rothschild, a filthy rich French banker. The ship itself was discovered by a diver in 1976 in the Tantura Lagoon. But the diver didn't have much money, and at the time, people weren't super interested in abandoned shipwrecks. Nobody bothered excavating the thing until 2008. That was when they found the ship extremely well preserved, still filled with goods, even sacks of hazelnuts and peanuts. According to Live Science, historical records show that the Baron was sending goods through his shipping company to a Jewish settlement on the coast. This must have been in the middle of a delivery when something happened and it found itself sitting at the bottom of the sea. Number 4. The Point Reyes boat. The Point Reyes boat is abandoned in Inverness, California. There's not much left of it now. A huge piece of boat-shaped metal sitting on a sandbar. It's one of the most photographed shipwrecks anywhere in the U.S. because of its position in a protected wetland. Among the animals and native plants, it's a great big rotting hulk of wood and metal that just doesn't belong. How did it get here? It was originally dragged by the previous landowner up onto the sandbar because he intended to fix the ship. But like so many projects, this one never got done. The owner never got around to making the repairs, he abandoned the boat where it was, and that was it. The land was eventually sold to a wetlands restoration firm. They had been planning to destroy the ship, but local photographers helped petition to keep the shipwreck where it stands. It worked and really paid off. Now there's even a trail that leads to the picturesque wreckage. And if you're feeling brave, you can even climb onto the boat. It's It's just not highly recommended because you might break through the wooden floor and be impaled by something spiky. Number 3. Royal Navy Shipwreck. A mysterious shipwreck was discovered on a Latvian beach. It wasn't a fishing boat from a local village. It wasn't even a discarded and abandoned cruise liner. Instead, it appears to be the broken remains of a Royal Navy warship from 200 years ago. The experts in Latvia found exposed beams on a sandy beach no more than a few miles from Riga. But it wasn't until excavators arrived with massive digging machines that the entire ship was revealed. They were able to look at the building material and date it back to Britain in the mid-1800s. Sadly, almost nothing is known of the origin of the ship. Its timbers are crafted of oak, copper nails were used in its construction, and the best guess historians have is that it was a warship for the British Royal Navy. Most likely it went on a patrol in the Baltics. If not a warship, it may have been a merchant vessel bringing goods from England to the North Seas and back. But there's really no way to tell for sure. Experts don't even know how it ended up abandoned on the beach, buried in several feet of sand. Number 2. A mysterious tanker. The wreckage of a mysterious tanker was found off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador in the Flemish Pass Basin. Neil Burgess with the local Preservation Society revealed sonar images of the ship showing it still sitting upright at the bottom of the ocean. But how the ship got there and when it happened is anybody's guess. One shot in the dark was that the ship was once a British oil tanker that, surprise surprise, was destroyed by German U-boats in World War II. We do know of one tanker in the area that got hit with 5 torpedoes and was broken clean in half. However, photographs of the ship haven't matched up with the sonar images. There are now heaps of other possibilities. The ship could be a German fishing trawler that sank back in 1985, or it could be the remains of a Russian container ship that went down in '82. The difficulty in determining its identity just goes to show how many shipwrecks are currently abandoned in the seas, seemingly everywhere you look. Number 1. The 1942 Outer Banks disaster. 80 years ago in 1942, the Lady Hawkins disappeared off the coast of North Carolina, killing over 250 people. The ship was a Canadian luxury liner that got blown up by a German U-boat, as was so common during the war. But what's really mysterious about the Lady Hawkins is that the wreckage has never actually been found. Despite our modern technology and seafloor mapping equipment, nobody knows where the bones of the ship lie. And it's not like historians and archaeologists haven't been looking. It's as if a full cruise ship just vanished into thin air. Only 71 out of 322 people on board the ship survived the attack. What we know for sure is that the U-boat blasted the ship, her forward mast broke, she careened onto her side, and everybody started tumbling into the water. Then, a second torpedo hit the engine room. It was a miracle that 71 people in their night clothes managed to get to a single lifeboat and reach safety. All these years later, the Lady Hawkins is still missing and there's no sign of it anywhere. Some believe the wreckage may never be found, while others eagerly await its rediscovery.
Number 10. Ancient Submarine. There's just one marina in the entire world that can boast having a 100-year-old submarine sitting abandoned at its docks. It's the Sandringham Yacht Club in Australia, home to the J7. The submarine is a familiar sight to the sailors who hang out at the yacht club, but most other people in Melbourne wouldn't even know she's there, even though it sits in plain sight in the middle of the club. There's literally numerous yachts surrounding the historical vessel. It was once one of the fastest submarines ever built, although these days she doesn't go anywhere. In fact, she hasn't moved in a century. The submarine was originally built for the British Navy in the earliest days of World War I. It was meant to be a vehicle that could combat the highly dangerous German U-boats. It could move at speeds of 19 knots, making it faster than any U-boat created by the Germans at the time. She had a range of 5,000 miles, which was quite extraordinary back then. However, it never saw a lot of action. It sank a few boats, damaged some warships, and then was gifted to Australia after the war. Australia didn't really need submarines though, so they just docked her and let her rot. It didn't help that she was hardly even usable by the time she made it 3 months across the ocean to the land down under. The J7 was left at the marina in 1922, and it hasn't moved an inch since. Number 9. A sinister discovery. A primary school teacher in the city of Liverpool made a terrifying discovery inside his house. Literally, inside the walls. His name is Jonathan Lewis. He picked up the keys to his brand new home on a Friday afternoon and was beyond thrilled to move all of his stuff in. Little did he know, he was in for a dark surprise. It was that first day that he discovered a space beneath the stairs. It seemed so hollow, and so he took a hammer and broke a hole in the wall to see what was hiding underneath. He thought it could be an extra room he could utilize. Unfortunately, what he found instead was a creepy doll with beady black eyes staring back at him, almost like she was peering into his soul. Inside the wall cavity, somebody had abandoned a bizarre ragdoll that looked like it belonged to a horror movie. To make things worse, it had a disturbing note in one of its creepy little doll hands. The note said the doll's name is Emily. It said her original owners lived in the house back in 1961 and that she stabbed them to death. But as terrifying of a discovery as this was, Jonathan wasn't too worried. He figures it was a prank by the previous homeowners. At least, he sure hopes it's a prank. What would you do if you found a doll like that hidden in the walls of your home? Let us know in the comments below. Number 8. Gruesome abandoned trailer. When police in Canada discovered an abandoned utility trailer northeast of Calgary, sitting on the side of the range road, they never could have guessed the horror they would find inside. They opened the trailer and discovered the human remains of a woman, someone who had clearly been murdered and then ditched in the trailer. The trailer had been abandoned for about a week before the locals took notice and called the cops. About 2 weeks after the corpse was found, she was identified as a Calgary resident named Myra Dela Cruz Paul, 40 years old. But here's where the discovery gets extra gruesome. Local police admitted that they suspect foul play in her death, but it's now been over 4 months and they haven't made any breaks in the case. Somebody was able to abduct this woman, kill her in a trailer, and then abandon the vehicle on the side of the road without ever being caught. Number 7. Chinese ghost ship. A mysterious Chinese ghost ship was just discovered abandoned and floating off the coast of Thailand. Well, it was doing a lot more sinking than it was floating. Staff from a Chevron offshore drilling rig came across it in the Gulf of Thailand. The ship was completely empty, not a single soul to be seen, and it was leaning slightly to the right as it gradually took on water. The workers had no idea what to do with the vessel, so they called in the local Navy to deal with it. But by the time the Navy arrived, the eerie ship had already sunk. It was identified as a Chinese cargo ship, and after it sank, it started leaking oil. Officials quickly showed up to try and clean the spill before the oil could reach the pristine waters around the tourist attraction of Koh Mu. But the real mystery is that nobody knows where the ship came from. Officials suspect it had been working in Vietnam or Cambodia before the sailors abandoned it, perhaps because it got damaged and there was nothing they could really do to salvage it. Number 6. Whale bones. In 1849, a farmer by the name of George Thorpe came across an abandoned pile of bones sticking up from the dirt in the town of Charlotte, Vermont. The bones had been unearthed previously by railroad workers building a line through the town. It was pretty clear the bones had come from a very large animal, but George couldn't recognize it. This was no horse or cow or any other animal from the farm, so he boxed up all the bones he could find and then sent them by wagon to the University of Vermont. Remember, this was the 1800s and monster bones were pretty unusual. They were scrutinized by American and European scientists who finally identified them as coming from a beluga whale. Yet, nobody could figure out how the bones of a beluga whale came to be left 200 feet above sea level and 200 miles from the nearest ocean. We know today that it's because the sea level used to be a lot higher. 13,000 years ago, this part of Vermont was underwater. A beluga whale died and its bones landed on the bottom of the ocean, now the farmer's land. They weren't abandoned inland by some ancient whale hunters or something like that. But of course, in 1849, nobody knew this, and it became a huge mystery for decades. Number 5. Angela Madsen's rowboat. The Row of Life, the famous boat used by Paralympian Angela Madsen, floated adrift in the ocean for over a year before finally washing ashore in the Marshall Islands at a remote section of Mili Atoll. Angela had used the boat in her attempt to become the first paraplegic, as well as the oldest woman, to ever row a boat from California to Hawaii. The 60-year-old was well on her way when a tropical cyclone bore down on her position in the Pacific Ocean, and she died. It was terribly tragic, but a German cargo ship was at least able to recover Angela's body. They found her still tethered to the rowboat, but because the storm was approaching fast, the ship's crew decided to abandon the boat and leave it behind. They also left behind the GoPro footage that Angela had captured for a documentary she was making while rowing the boat. After drifting 4,000 miles, the abandoned boat is finally back on shore. Sadly, the boat had already been looted by the time the proper authorities got to it. Life jackets, the rigging, and the GoPro cameras had all been taken. Would you ever attempt a journey like this? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 4. A photo left behind. Film student Victor Galuska discovered thousands of photographs in 2016 while digging through an abandoned house in the small Moldovan village of Rositiec. For his diploma, he was creating a film about the mass emigration that happened in this part of the small European country, which caused hundreds of people to abandon their houses in the 1970s. He discovered the photographs left behind in the abandoned structures, giving a rare and shocking glimpse into Soviet life in a rural village between the 1950s and the 1970s. In total, he walked away with 4,000 images. They were originally taken by a local photographer named Zaharia, who died in 1993. What's truly shocking is that if you didn't already know these pictures were taken in Eastern Europe, you may have just thought they came from some rural town in 1950s America, at least if it weren't for all the Soviet stars on their hats and the headscarves. Number 3. A lost badge from World War I. A man with a metal detector scouring the Tasmanian highlands for treasure came across an abandoned badge from World War I. Philip Sarosi didn't quite know what he had at first. The badge looked official. It clearly had something to do with military service, but he wasn't really sure what it meant. He did the only thing he could think of, took some photos of it and put them online for people to see and comment on for themselves. As it turned out, the badge had been given to a woman who lost 2 sons in the war. These female badges were issued to the closest female relative of a deceased soldier, normally a wife or a mother. Her name was Marion Cranswick, from the small Tasmanian town of Stanley. She lost her son John in 1917 while he fought in France, and her other son Thurston the year after. Nobody knows how the badge ended up abandoned in the middle of the wilderness, hidden under a foot of dirt. But it has since been reunited with Marion's great-grandson, an 81-year-old man now living in Western Australia. His name is Thurston, named after his great-uncle. Number 2. The Bridge to Nowhere. The Suwannee Springs Bridge in Live Oak, Florida is a curious abandoned structure the locals call the Bridge to Nowhere. It was originally completed in 1931 by the Austin Brothers Bridge Company, then used by the locals for decades as the main thoroughfare in the area. In 1971, the bridge was officially closed to all vehicle traffic. An upgraded bridge and a bypass were created nearby, and so this bridge was forgotten by pretty much everyone. Yet the abandoned bridge was never destroyed. It's still there today and remains a popular destination for adventure cyclists and dog walkers. It's rusted, covered in graffiti, and definitely a bit creepy at night, but it still stands strong. Number 1. Baby in an egg box. In Siberia, a baby was discovered abandoned in an egg box. A group of 5 teenagers stumbled upon the baby by accident, a newborn girl that had been left in the snow. As if leaving a baby in the snow wasn't bad enough, the temperature had dropped down to a -4 degrees Fahrenheit. It was so cold that if the teens hadn't found the baby when they did, it likely would have died from exposure. The teens immediately called their parents, who were able to get the baby to a hospital in their small village of Sosnovka near Novosibirsk. We're happy to say the child made a full recovery, and then things got even better. The parents of one of the teens who found the little girl volunteered to adopt her. In the end, it all worked out to be a happy story. That is, except for the mother. Police are currently searching for the woman who abandoned her child in the cardboard box, and when they find her, she'll be charged with the attempted murder of a minor. What would you do if you found a baby in an egg box? Let us know your thoughts on this strange case in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like these.